How's it going, everybody? I'd like to welcome you to our next tech support ticket Thursday. This is actually being recorded on Wednesday, but it's released on Thursday. So this will be ticket number 5, and we'll dive into some of the questions that you all have for me that have been posted in comments. So let's go ahead and dive into some of these questions. I don't filter them out, so if there's a question posted or a comment posted or anything in between, as long as it's legitimate, I will go ahead and provide an answer for that. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. All right, so I have a question that came in on actually I have to minimize this a little bit so I can reference the video that the question comes from. The question comes in from VMware DCB15 Management ESXi host and vCenter server with an embedded PSC deployment. How to do capacity planning of ESXi hosts? So I want to provision 50. I think I might have already covered this question actually. 50 Windows 10 desktops with 2 CPUs and 4 gigs of RAM. I did answer this question already, but for those of you that didn't watch Ticket 4, essentially you just need to go to a capacity planning tool. There's a bunch of them on the internet, and basically punch in what it is you're trying to do, and it'll give you a kind of a rough estimation of how many hosts you're going to need. You're going to need more than one host. You're going to probably need a cluster, 3, 4, 5 of them, to do what you want to do. And I'm going to go on a limb here and say there's probably going to be a couple of VMs that you're going to need that are going to be more needed than others, more highly available. So you might, HA on its own and DRS may not be sufficient. You might have to throw in fault tolerance. But those would be my initial answer, because I just remember that I had already answered that question. Another one, I passed the VMware vSphere 6.7 exam. That's the name of the video. And then the question is it a requirement to pass 6.7 before you take version 7? The answer is no. You can take 7.0 straight out of the gate if you'd like to do so. And a lot of people do, especially those of you that are new to VMware. People will not want to go back and study 6.0, 6.5, 6.7. I've studied each one of those, so I'm pretty familiar with how each one works. The main thing to keep in mind, though, is regardless of which version of VMware you start with, whether it's I started on 5.1, I think, 5.0, and barely. I just started messing around with it then. When I got into 5.5, it was the first one that I really got into and started to really understand. I dove pretty deep into that one. So that was pretty straightforward from what I can remember. And then from there, it was making sure that I could configure everything from the updated GUI. So basically just go back through the entire blueprint again, which there really isn't a lot to cover. Probably 40 topics or so. Make sure that you can still do them. A lot of them are the same way, same thing, but the way some of the new features that are implemented obviously need to be played around with and things like that. But for the most part, as long as you're going through and you understand what's new and different or has been deprecated in new releases of vSphere, that's really the important part. Because at the end of the day, the main view of how vCenter works and vSphere works hasn't changed a lot. They've added more features, more capabilities, and things like that, but the underlying architecture and what's actually going on, the majority of that has stayed the same from 5.5 till 7. So as long as you understand how the main crux of vSphere works and the main crux of how vCenter operates, whether you learn 6.7 or 7.0 isn't really going to make much of a difference. I would definitely understand what the differences between the different versions are, learn those differences. So I've been in a rev change update, meaning I will learn what are the differences between 6.0 and 6.5, and then I'll test out 6.5 and it's like, okay, well, what is the difference between 6.5 and 6.7? I'll test out those features and stuff like that. Make sure that I still know how to work with the vSphere architecture as it was originally designed, and then go from there. It's really not too much to do. I could say that if you were to give a if you were to not if you didn't know anything about vSphere and you wanted to learn it and be comfortable, 6 to 8 weeks. If you wanted to spend a little bit more time on that, spend a couple of months, 3-4 months total tops, if you're consistently playing with it, I could say you could be pretty comfortable with vSphere within well inside of 90 days. And if you were to, it's not so much getting it up and running that's the problem. That's actually pretty easy. And that's why a lot of the videos that I put out around VMware are getting things operational. A lot of the day-to-day stuff where if something breaks and you have to troubleshoot it, or if something isn't working the way that it's supposed to, for example, one of the things I'm working on right now is trying to deploy vSphere replication and site recovery manager. I've added a second vCenter server and a second data center and added more storage to the lab that we're currently working through and trying to make it more and more complicated, but to simulate a real-world solution. Those things right there on themselves are not working. So VRA and which is the replication appliance, and then SRM, they're not currently working for me. I'm not sure why. So I'm having to go back to the drawing board, watch videos, read the documentation more. I know how they work. It's just a matter of getting them to get into my environment. That's the problem I'm having right now. And as soon as I get them to work, I will record videos on those and talk about how replication and SRM come into play between two different vCenter sites. So things like that do come into play, and that's where the more complicated pieces of VMware come into play. It's not the deploy a distributed switch and add hosts to it, and then you go out and do vMotion and storage and some storage-based policy management, and everybody's happy. And a little bit of vSAN, some HA. That's really the main components of any vSphere environment. So the more things you mess with and break and have to try to fix, that's where you really get good at VMware. The CLI is the one thing that I don't know that well, which is why I have not scheduled the deploy exam, because right now I really don't want to spend $450 on an exam and fail. I need to spend more time on the CLI, understanding how to do everything, because from the couple of there's a couple of like simulation websites that I found online that kind of simulate the advanced professional deploy exam. I've been going through that and I'm like, oh, I read the question and I'm like, I have no idea how to answer that, or at least I have an idea that I might be okay, but I click on it, I'm like, yep, that definitely wasn't what I was gonna do, and I'm like, I definitely need more time. So I postponed that exam for a later point in time. I'm probably going to, because I won't be ready by June, and I know that I won't be ready for advanced professional deploy until after June. I'm going to upgrade my lab to 7.0, vSphere 7, ESXi 7, and then I'm going to go through and start preparing for that version of the exam, because it's able to be scheduled right now. I just haven't pulled the trigger on it. I just need more time in the CLI and get more comfortable with the GUI and stuff like that. So being able to audit yourself is also important, because like right now, could I like bum rush it and could I maybe pass the deploy exam and come out with like just a passing score? I probably could. I'm pretty confident that I'd be able to do that, but that really isn't the goal for the cert, is to just pass. I want to do well on the exam. I want the exam to be like, okay, yeah, I put enough effort into an exam and the training that was needed in order to be successful with it. So that's my approach to that type of stuff. So, but yeah, definitely worth sitting down through the install, config, manage course if you have the ability to do so. All right. Another question was from the PCNSA passing video where I took the Palo Alto Networks exam. How long did you study for PCNSA? I took about 2 months, and it wasn't a dedicated 2 months. It was kind of off and on. But one of the things that I definitely did do was read a lot of documentation, and I went through the Palo Alto University or their online training program that they had, and that went pretty well. I watched a lot of the videos for that, took a lot of the notes. The one thing that I ran into was because of licensing issues, I couldn't play with a lot of the features. A lot of your advanced firewalling capabilities weren't supported. I couldn't do remote access VPN with Global Protect. A lot of things like that weren't supported. So I was kind of like, okay. Could I have maybe reached out to Palo Alto and gotten a temporary license and then done some stuff? Maybe, but I don't think Palo Alto is just going to let some, even though I'm an engineer, I would be like, I'm going to put these videos out on YouTube or whatever, they probably would have denied the request. I didn't try, but this is my guess. But I did everything I could, or I tested everything I could that didn't need a license, and did my best to try to demonstrate them. So I would love to go get the next level, their NSE, the engineer exam, which dives into panorama and stuff like that, but I have a limitation with licensing, and I can't find anything online that would allow me to buy licenses. Because I would, for example, F5 has a lab license that you can buy through CDW, which is $125. I'm seriously considering downloading some F5 VMs and buying a couple of lab licenses and just playing with F5, because it's one of the other things that I'd love to dive into. But unfortunately, I'm just not there yet with my lab. So definitely read the docs and make sure you understand and go through the videos. If you are serious about certification exams, make sure you watch the videos and you take notes and you read the documentation, because pretty much every question that I was asked that I wasn't sure on, I went back and reread the documentation or read it, and it was right there in the documentation. So make sure you do that. A buddy of mine, he commented on DCB 15, and he deployed the VCSA to be able to migrate VMs on an old server. His first name is George. He's also got a YouTube channel. Good friend of mine. He passed the CCA lab like a week before I did. So hats off to CCA number 50640, I think is the CCA number. So yeah, good stuff there to George. I got somebody thanked me for putting out a video on web interface intro and new device admin creation for Palo Alto. So you are welcome there. There's a question on how to install a CSR 1000V in EVE-NG. The question states, I used Genus 3 to do your labs. Actually, let me move this over here so it's more directly in where I'm at. So I'm facing the microphone. Let's see. I used Genus 3 to do your labs, but it seems that doesn't works lately. I've been trying to install CSR 1000V in EVE-NG, but it doesn't work for me. I have other Cisco viral images installed and it works fine. I can connect via web browser to the devices and configure them. With CSR 1000V, I followed the same process to upload Viral's QCOW2 image. I've tried to with different versions as well. iOS and QCOW2 rename Vert IOA QCOW2. And when I start Node in Eve, I stops in 2 seconds. If doesn't stops, I can't connect. Any idea? I'd be the happiest person in the world if we could solve it. So the answer to that question is, when I literally did the video on that, I was following the documentation pretty specifically to that, because I knew it would be a problem. So if you have access to the viral images, the viral image that's got the QCOW2 with the serial console is what I would recommend doing there. And download that, and then import that. Make sure you rename it to be the right naming convention that Eve can start. But I did provide the website and to the documentation, because I literally followed the documentation explicitly, and it worked out just fine. So that's what I would recommend doing there. I showed you a hard way of doing it, but that was how I was able to get the CSR to work. And then once I got it to work, because there's a couple of functions you have to do with like brackets and pressing an I or a J or something like that. I forget the specific keystrokes that needed to be entered. But once I followed the documentation based on the way it was written, everything worked the way that it was supposed to. So just keep that in mind when you're playing around with it. There was a question on security configuring ASA multiple context mode. Could you please share the ASA image used for multiple context mode? I cannot do that. I don't own that image. That was an image that I was able to find online doing some Googling, and so that's what I'm going to tell you. That's exactly what I said, is work on your Google Foo, because that's how I found it. And it was one of those things where I don't even remember what I Googled, but I Googled around for it, and eventually I found it on, I don't know if the site was reputable or not, but I found it on a site, clicked on the download link, the download came down, and magically I had it. So, but it's out there, other people use it. So I can't tell you how to get it other than what I just did, because that's how I got it. And it was, I came up across it by accident. I didn't actually ask for it from anyone. I have been offered images, and I typically tell people I don't want them unless it's something I'm actually studying for. On the service provider Intra AS L2 VPN X-Connect, which is a point-to-point pseudo wire, X-Connect is not working for me, and oh my goodness, this person decided to drop in a debug of their problem. I'm reading through their debug right now, and I'm pretty sure that, let's see. So the problem that, what is .1 configured as? I'm reading through the, oh, it says it's configured as a /32. So this person actually fixed their own issue, so congratulations on fixing your own issues. And it says, I configured all loopbacks as /32 and set the MPLS LDP router ID loopback 0 on all the PE routers, which is what you need to do. That's one thing that's kind of weird about how MPLS works. You use the physical interface to go out and discover other MPLS enabled routers, and using the 224.0.0.2, it's the all route, .1, I think. It's either .1 or .2. I don't remember specifically which one is the all routers multicast group, but whichever one is the all routers multicast group, which I think is .2 if I'm not mistaken. I think .1 is all hosts, but I think that's correct if I'm remembering correctly. But you point to the all routers link local multicast group. You're going to discover that, and then once you've discovered another LDP enabled device, you're actually going to form, and you use UDP 646 to do that. When you flip over to the actual LDP adjacency, you're using TCP 646 loopback to loopback. So if you have the router ID set, or the connect interface connected, set to connect on the directly connected interface, then you might run into problems with the LDP peering. So keep things like that in mind. There are a couple of specific use cases where you would want to go on the connected interface as your connect interface, but the majority of the times you're not going to. So let's take a look at our next question. This question comes from Tech Support Thursday, ticket 4. It says, there is at least one more guy from Russia who works with your SD-WAN lab. Your videos are very useful. They put a lot of E's in very. Even I have a lot of things to teach you by my own. Much more useful than Cisco guys' videos. They work in Cisco, have all materials, certs, etc. They don't use a CA, a Certificate Authority on-prem, which is exactly what my goal was when I did the SD-WAN labs, is I did not want to have to deal with a third-party CA. I just created a CA and went that direction with it. So yeah, good stuff there. I provide you as much information as I can, and one thing that I found lately, pardon me one second. One thing that I've found is a lot of people use a newer version of SD-WAN than what I I rolled out 18.4. Some people are using 19 and 20. I have not tested those out yet. I have been giving some consideration of circling back because it's been several months since I've studied SD-WAN, and just circling back and playing around with it again, and trying to cover some of the topics that I didn't cover last time, because it's been a little bit and maybe it's time to circle back and reevaluate. But I don't know. I'm playing with the idea right now. I'm not really sure because I don't want to go back to recover something I've already talked about or recover it. For the simple fact that I'm looking to move forward into onto other things. So, for example, I'm looking to dive into NSXT, which is one of the reasons why I want to upgrade my VMware lab to vSphere 7, because I ran into problems with 6.7. I even upgraded my lab, recorded a video on it as well, of taking all of my ESXi hosts that were on 6.7 update 1 and upgrading to update 3, because when I went to go basically push NSX onto those ESXi hosts, it told me there was a problem. It was a very, very vague issue, and when I go to research it, there's all kinds of things that pop up with that. So I figured and found out that by upgrading might fix that, and I was looking for a compatibility guide for like NSXT3 and seeing what which specific ESXi host versions would support that, which hypervisors. And my version is supposed to be supported, and it looked like it was going to work out better, but then I only got a very small percentage in the deployment process, and it failed again on me. So I'm going to just go ahead and bite the bullet, upgrade to 7.0, but that'll take me a couple of days before I have the opportunity to get through that. There was so I've recorded a video and the licensing was showing, and so I'm going to have to go back and adjust that. But if you guys need licensing, just go to the VMUG Advantage and buy it. There's a comment about anyone can get one off of eBay for a few quid. I'm assuming you're from the UK, but that's one way you can do it as well. So I wouldn't trust anything off eBay, especially when it comes to licensing, because I don't know if it's going to be legit or not. Another question off of SD-WAN 3. Above commands only work on specific iOS version. I'm using a 3725 router. Oh, it's a 3725. That explains. Okay, that's why it didn't click in my brain. With 12415T, which is a very old version of iOS. In EVNG, before doing configuration, correct date and time on router, else you will be able to get errors when you type command crypto PKI export. Yep. I used a regular iOS-V router running 15.6 code, and that's what I used as my certificate authority, was a router, because it made it easy to. It was a very, very lightweight CA, and not quite as lightweight as obviously like a Docker container instead of Eve Pro, but I wasn't using Eve Pro at the time. So keep those things in mind as well. My lab, CCA service provider lab attempt and my experience. Really good videos, but why don't you offer mentorship? Mentoring will help us progress, and you can also charge us for your services. It's good to share generic info, but sometimes we need customized support, but there are not many people out there who give any time. Which I know must not be easy to facilitate everyone, but if we get some help, it will help us reach goal. And I asked, what are you specifically looking for? And the question was answered with just guidance, how to prepare someone with whom we can discuss our study path, and if there is something I do not know as fresher, I can get an advice. But I believe if I will have mentor, journey will be easier. Okay, and now that I've actually read that out loud, that question makes a lot more sense. So I don't really offer a mentorship at all. I can answer a question and point you in the right direction, but more often than not, what I'm going to tell you to do is read the blueprint for whatever it is you're studying for, because you're rather vague in your question. It's more of a generic request for mentorship versus a specific certification. The blueprint is the number one thing that I always recommend people go read, understand that, look up the documentation, start going through it. because a lot of the questions you're going to get asked on the exams is going to be in the documentation, as well as other books that might be out there. But if it's Cisco Press, there's probably a question, especially if it ties specifically to your exam. That's going to be something that they're going to ask you. But beyond that, I don't charge people for mentorships, because to me that's like trying to steal people's money for answering questions. That's why I try to respond to YouTube comments whenever I can. I'll never charge for a mentorship. If you have a question, I'm going to try to answer it. What I do charge, though, for, and people have asked me a couple times, and I'll answer it again, I charge for the lab or the topology files and for the initial configs, because those take a lot of time to build and create. Those are time consuming. And it's like I charge you $10. $10 a month is not going to break the bank. Some people spend that a day on other things that they feel like they should spend their money on. And if that's the case, more power to you. But a small nominal fee of $10 a month that I charge you for access to the topology files and the initial configs for sd-wan and for the Encore and an RC video series, I feel like that's a fair ask, and most people have no problem paying for it. I have consistently gaining more and more members. So I'll never charge for mentorship, because to me that's kind of dirty. I will just provide that information, because for anything that I would charge for, that's going to make me look kind of like a jerk, and I don't want to be looked at it that way for just providing advice. Advice is, I look at advice as being free, so I can point you in the right direction for something, and the answer that I give for most people, specifically to your question, is read the blueprint and then start reading the documentation when you start going through the blueprint. Google that particular topic and see what Google gets you to. Being able to research a problem is actually rather valuable, especially in today's world when you're in a situation where the internet is full of information. You just have to learn how to navigate it. And that's going to be a huge thing. I Google things every day, multiple times per day. So that would be my advice for you when you're starting to dive into the operations. There's a question on DCB16, adding data centers and hosts to vCenter. While watching this video, I asked myself, what would be the difference between HA and fault tolerance? Can you share your wisdom on that definition, Rob? And I did, and the answer is, I'll reiterate it here. It's simple. High availability in VMware is when a failed VM on a failed host if a host goes down and a VM goes down because that host goes down, HA's job is to take that failed VM, because the host that VM was sitting on failed, and evacuate it or move it to another host that's active inside that cluster, and then restart the VM. And that's basically what ends up happening with that particular situation. So that's basically what I answered. And fault tolerance is another HA feature, but it provides a situation where there's no downtime. So when you assign HA to the cluster itself, and then that applies to all the VMs that reside on the host inside of that cluster. When you're working with fault tolerance, that's a VM level high availability, where you're saying this particular VM needs to be so highly available that we're going to basically clone it onto another host, and anything that happens on this particular VM is going to also be done on the other VM. And this way here, in the event that the VM that's been configured as primary sitting on host 1, if that host dies and the primary fault tolerant VM goes down as well, we don't have to worry about it. It's automatically going to shift the traffic over to host 2, where VM2, the clone of VM1, is already working. So that's basically how that works. So definitely important to understand how high availability works. On SD-WAN 3, hi Rob, when I try to generate certificate for vBond and vSmart and I copy CSR to CA router, so CSR is a certificate signing request. You're trying to generate an identity certificate, and you're trying to get it signed by a CA that will say, yes, this is the who the person says that they are. And when press quit and this don't generate certificate, which is already done for vManage. Any idea what is fixed for this issue? vSmart and vBond already appear to vManage, but not showing system IP and site ID for both, but showing for vManage. Well, from what I remember about that, I get a lot of questions about sd-wan, which is why I'm thinking about going back through it again, because I honestly forgot some of these details. When you're joining vBond and vSmart to vManage, you're pushing the certificate, the root certificate that's automatically added to vManage, you're pushing that down to vBond and vSmart. And because you're pushing it and you go to generate the CSR for those particular devices, which you do inside of the GUI, from what I recall, and I'm trying to think about the process in my brain now that I'm going back through it. You generate the certificate signing request from the GUI when you're underneath controllers. You select that, and then you take the output that shows up in there's a little pop-up box, and you copy and paste that out of the pop-up box over to your CA. You take the CSR to your CA. You request I forget the actual term. It's and forgive me if I can't remember the exact syntax, but you're requesting a certificate. You paste in the identity certificate, the CSR, and then the CA will kick back a signed copy or a signed certificate. You take what is generated after you press quit, and then that output is pasted back into, and you go ahead and you upload a certificate and you paste that information into the GUI inside of vManage. That automatically pushes that down to the respective vBond or vSmart, and then after a couple of seconds, that synchronization comes into play, and that BFD session comes up, or maybe not, or that maybe it may not be BFD, but that SSL connection comes online. And once that SSL connection comes online, then you're able to move forward with everything else. So the controller process is actually pretty simple. It's the vEdge that can be a royal pain in the patootie when you are trying to get it to onboard the what do you call it? When you're trying to onboard the certificate, because you have to go into vShell mode and do this, that, and the other, and do a TFTP download. That's at least how I did it. On DCB 16, adding data centers and hosts to vCenter server. This question's kind of, there's some vulgarities in here, so I will try to omit them where they apply. I replied to this question just before I started the video, so maybe the answer will be provided to me afterwards. The comment/question. Jesus Christ, man, I was going to start learning this. I got you drawing it. The grid well. No, I got to restart. I was going to start learning this. I got to drawing it. The grid well, pulling all the aspects onto the screen to link them up. I see your videos now. I'm not sure I want to carry on. How many videos have you done this on? And I'm not sure what he means by that. I'm really, really confused at what that person's referencing. I have no idea what grid he's referencing. So, and by the way, when it comes to commenting on videos, no reason to drop an F-bomb. There really isn't. To be honest with you, you should be ashamed of yourself, to be honest with you. Just so you know, everything is public. So maybe you don't care and how you sound on the internet, but I do. And you notice one thing that I don't use is profane language on my channel or in my videos. Every once in a while, I might start pushing that border, but because I try to maintain a level of professionalism on the channel, I don't use vulgarities. I don't use profane language. I don't say that I don't use that in the real world. I mean, I'll cuss like a sailor in a heartbeat if it comes down to it. But that's in my personal life. But on here, I try to maintain a level of professionalism, which is why I'm trying to answer these questions. Even though I think you're frustrated about something, and I'm not sure exactly what you're frustrated about. So, so hopefully you can provide a little insight on that. And you might be like, I don't care that I cuss. It's whatever. No one's going to know who I am. Believe me. The moment you post something on the internet and somebody figures out who you are, even if you try to use a pseudonym, screen name, it won't be hard to figure out who's who. On Encore and an RC Video Series 1, the question is, good work, really enjoy your courses. Just one thing, can you provide the info on Eve images used in your topology so I can add the same ones? So I did provide him that I use the Cisco Modeling Labs or CML images that you can also access by purchasing access. iOS 15.6, 15.6, iOS L2, 15.2, ASA 9.9, and XR 6.1 are the versions that I'm using. There was a question on basic ASA 1, or Cisco ASA Basics 001, the initial configuration setup. Just bought me a used ASA 5506 to play with, which is what, right there, this guy right here, that is an ASA 5506. Right above that is a 2504 wireless controller. To play with, and your video helped me get started. Very smooth and easy to follow if you know the basics. Your generosity keeps giving. You are welcome. I definitely try to. That's the goal. There was another question on sd-wan 12, setting up the ASA for internet internal routing. The question was, I see that on further lessons there is no theme about T-lock extension. Do you plan on explaining that? Initially I was, but because of the fact that I got redirected later on after I got to a certain point with SD-WAN, I got tired of it. I needed a change, so I switched gears and went another direction. And so there were quite a few topics that I for whatever reason wasn't able to get working, or some other situation that just it stopped. So I didn't bother to continue that. But T-lock extension is a pretty easy concept to understand. It just, and I'm not going to get into it here, but there's plenty of people out online that have covered it. But I am giving it some thought to circle back and redo it again. A friend of mine is giving me a little bit of crap about not actually taking the SD-WAN exam, but I'm thinking it might be actually kind of cool to go take, but we'll see about that. Same video, different question, same person. What is the purpose of using ASA in SD-WAN labs? Why did you show this video? Is this video necessary to study further lessons? Well, it's not specific to SD-WAN, no. But the key driver by deploying an ASA firewall in a deployment is because it's a firewall, right? It's designed to be stateful and the operations. You wouldn't put an SD-WAN device on the internet edge, and at least I haven't taken the firewalling capabilities that far. So I know zone-based firewall is supported on it and some other stuff, things that I have not covered yet. But those are some of the characteristics and attributes that would be needed on the internet edge, where an ASA firewall is already there and a lot of people already use it. So that's why I chose to go that direction. And the ASA is a firewall, right? It's a firewall. Same thing with FTD. I was tempted to put FTD in there too, but I thought that'd be just too much resource contention, and that's why I went with that, because you use a firewall to terminate the internet connection. So that's why I did that. So take it for what it is, not what it isn't. Some people have have provided commentary on some things, and they think it's stupid the way I did something, and that's okay. You're entitled to your opinion, but that's all it is. It's just an opinion. I don't let people's comments get under my skin or whatever. It's like, you know what? If you don't like the way I did something, number one, I provide all this content for free. I don't charge people to view the videos. If you are kind enough, you'll subscribe and become a member to help promote the channel. You'll share the information with others to try to grow it. But beyond that, I do what I do because I try to be as real world and as best practice as I can be. But I also know that whenever there is an internet circuit, a lot of people like to put a firewall there. Simple as that. There's really no grand scheme. I don't have some master plan that I'm trying to get across to anybody. It just, the training is what it is. I think that's it for questions, and it is awesome. So I do want to thank everybody for hanging out and doing the subscription thing. We are continuing to grow pretty rapidly. Just a little over 23,000 subscribers. So going to be at 23,300 here pretty soon. I can't say enough about that. You guys are awesome. I want to thank everybody that has subscribed for subscribing. Now that the Tech Support Thursday thing is coming out, I feel like I'm getting more and more comments, but this helps me keep up to date on the comments and answer them. So I'm hoping to get, I want to upgrade my VMware lab to 7.0 here in the next week or so. And then once that's done, I want to take that to the next level and deploy NSXT and get my VCP in that. And then take it to the next level and do the VCAPs as well. But I also want to take and do some AWS. I want to go learn AWS and learn that pretty well. So I'm trying to like taper back. I'm not trying to like go gung ho, because we are in the middle of April and I've basically got another 6 weeks or so before it gets really nice outside, which will be the middle or end of May. And I really don't want to be in front of the computer. I really don't. If I can be off the computer doing other things, I absolutely 100% want to be, because I live up north, so it's cold out the majority of the year. So if I can take the opportunity to not be on the computer, I want to be off the computer. But I also have a drive to go just become a well-rounded engineer. That's my goal. Student first, engineer second, teacher third. So that has been and always will be my workflow. There was a period of time where I didn't follow that mantra, and it came back to bite me. So yeah, that's pretty much where I go from here. If there's anything that you would like me to, anything you'd like to see covered in an upcoming video that I can facilitate, I will. I am working on some data center specific content, so I have a VXLAN lab built, and I'm going to continue working through it and do some VXLAN coverage, because, well, I think VXLAN is awesome, and I'll know if people comment on VXLAN if they watch the end of the video. So yeah, good stuff there. So again, I want to thank everybody for hanging out with me in this video, and until next time, guys, take her easy.